Fourth-round picks are usually footnotes, guys who fill a role. But Amon-Ra St Brown was never destined for that kind of career. The production was undeniable and the film backed it up. Yet no one was positioning him as a franchise cornerstone. That chasm between the player he was becoming and the perception of him was a constant shadow, because what truly defined Amon-Ra wasn't a single highlight. It was a foundation laid long before the NFL ever knew his name. Amon-Ra St Brown was raised in a household where ease was not an option. His father, John Brown, a former Mr. Universe, was a man of iron will, intense, disciplined, and he offered no apologies for it. My dad drove me and my brothers hard when we were kids. He was essentially our strength coach. He made it to every single thing we did. In my family, you were in the garage lifting weights at 5 years old. So from ages 5, 6, and 7, we were all in that garage, grinding. Every single day was regimented. Every drill had a point. In that house, you weren't praised for being special. You were reminded that the work was never finished. Amon-Ra and his brothers were in a constant state of training, speed work, conditioning, hand drills, not to chase celebrity, but because that was the minimum standard. You'd get home, you'd handle your schoolwork, then you had to train with me. It was a heavy load, but for you, it was just the routine. What made Amon-Ra different wasn't flash, it was a methodical obsession. While his peers fantasized about scoring touchdowns, he was consumed by the mechanics, footwork, leverage, all the thankless details. Even his sun god nickname wasn't about ego. It was about identity. Amon-Ra is the name of the Egyptian sun god, and my brother Osiris is named for the Egyptian god of the underworld. He really embraced those names because he understands there's power in them. That's a principle my father hammered into us. It was a daily mandate. He was meant to rise, whether anyone was watching or not. By the time he got to high school, that mentality was already forged into his DNA. His objective wasn't to be the most gifted athlete on the turf. His goal was to be the most prepared. That relentless discipline carried him straight into Friday nights, where talent finally converged with production and the rest of the nation started to take notice. At Mater Dei High School, Amon-Ra St Brown was an absolute force. Competing in one of America's elite high school programs, surrounded by a roster of future Power 5 and NFL athletes, Amon-Ra was the one unwavering element. Quarterbacks changed, schemes were adjusted, defenses stacked the box against him, none of it made a difference. He closed out his high school career with more than 2,800 receiving yards and 35 touchdowns, clinching back-to-back state titles and becoming the most dependable weapon in a program overflowing with stars. But here's where the narrative gets strange. For all the stats, for all the dominant tape, the hype never seemed to catch up to the reality. Recruiting services pegged him as solid but not a generational talent, dependable but not explosive, a polished receiver but not the kind of player you build your future around. That outside chatter never got to him. That's just part of the business of being a professional athlete, so I don't let myself get tangled up in it. I just don't engage with any of it, because Amon-Ra wasn't worried about rankings. He was committed to stacking reps. While other receivers were making circus catches to impress scouts, he was dismantling opponents with surgical precision, clean breaks, and vice grip hands. Coaches put their faith in him because he never deviated from the game plan. His teammates counted on him because he never failed to show up. I ask every single college coach the same question. In the last 20 years, have you seen another receiver like Amon? Not one of them has told me they've seen someone better. So when the university started calling, he didn't go for the flashiest sales pitch. He looked for the place where hard work held the most value. Amon-Ra, where will you be playing your college football? I'll be attending USC. Every top-tier program in the country coveted him. Traditional powerhouses promised him targets, media exposure, and immediate stardom, but he had zero interest in shortcuts. He picked USC for a very specific reason. I picked USC for many reasons, but the biggest factor was that I really admire Coach Helton. I believe he's one of the best coaches in college football. Choosing Los Angeles meant walking into a daily war. The receiver room was full of future pros, the offense was an NFL system, and freshmen earned no special treatment. The spotlight was blinding. The weight of expectation was crushing, and the room for error was practically zero. If he was going to prove his worth, he insisted on doing it where nothing was given, and everything had to be taken. So throughout my entire upbringing, the driving force was never letting my father down. Of course, I wanted to perform well, make plays, do all of that, but avoiding the disappointment in my dad was the absolute priority. That was the most important thing. USC wasn't the easy route. It was the crucible that would demand he become undeniable. And at USC, Amon-Ra St Brown didn't show up as a marquee name. He showed up as a technician walking into a factory that relentlessly produces stars. From his very first practices, it was clear he was built differently. He wasn't louder or more flamboyant, just more precise. His routes were sharper, his hands were stronger through contact. His grasp of spacing was more like a veteran's than a rookie's. As a true freshman, he didn't wait in line for his opportunity. He seized a role in the offense. He stays in to block. Slovis going deep. St. Brown, he's got it. He ended that season with 60 catches for 750 yards, leading all USC receivers. A stunning accomplishment for a first-year player at a school famed for its receiving talent. But what defined him wasn't the final stat line, it was how he earned it. On third downs, in tight coverage, in clutch moments when his quarterback needed absolute reliability. That's the world Amon-Ra thrives in. Slovis, over the middle, in stride, on the money, St. Brown is gone. He wasn't the fastest man on the field. He wasn't the biggest guy out there. But he was consistently and exactly where he was supposed to be. And that simple fact made him unstoppable. By the time his freshman year was over, everyone inside that program knew one thing for certain. Within USC, they had their most dependable target. But on the outside, the narrative was completely different. Reliability doesn't make headlines, and pure consistency rarely gets the blood pumping. As his on-field duties increased, so did the chasm between his actual impact and his perceived ceiling. By his second year, Amon-Ra St Brown wasn't merely part of the game plan. He was the foundation of the offense. On third down, Slovis puts it up toward the end zone. Hauled in for the score. He became his quarterback's failsafe, the target you instinctively looked for when a play fell apart, the one who mastered leverage, timing, and body control to outwork the defender in front of him. The production was an inevitable result. Slovis, with the crowd roaring, drops back. He lets it fly deep, and what an unbelievable grab! Season after season, he compiled efficient stats, not through huge, explosive games, but through methodical, relentless work. By the conclusion of his career at USC, he had amassed over 2,200 yards receiving and 16 touchdowns in a mere 3 seasons, delivering exactly what a top-tier prospect is supposed to: perform, adapt, produce. And still, a puzzling trend continued, regardless of the stats, the game film, or his unwavering dependability. He was never discussed as a legitimate future star. I think he's a solid player. He shows some good ability after the catch, as you noted, but nothing jumps off the page in terms of his size, speed, or overall athleticism. At USC, he produced, but was seldom the main attraction, eclipsed by recruits with more sizzle and buried under discussions about potential and physical gifts. Analysts would compliment his technique, then stop short. Scouts would call him pro-ready, and then pump the brakes. The same old labels dogged him. High floor, low ceiling. Solid, but not a game changer. Amon-Ra St Brown just doesn't have the size or the speed you want at the wide receiver spot. He took in every last word. And as always, he didn't say a thing in his defense. Because at this point, he'd figured out a truth most athletes never learn. Being underestimated wasn't a handicap. It was an asset. When he entered the NFL draft, he was leaving USC as one of the Pac-12's most proven receivers. A player that teams knew they could count on, even if they hadn't fully bought into his potential. That gap between the player he was and the player they saw carried him right into the draft and forged the chip on his shoulder that would reshape his career. When my name was finally called, I wasn't happy. I was just angry at the whole situation. But looking back now, that moment flipped a switch for me. That draft weekend should have been his proof. Instead, it was more of the same. Receivers with more buzz were taken first. I remember watching other receivers get picked. And I'm sitting there thinking, seriously, I know I'm a better player than him. I know I am. Bigger guys, faster, 40-yard dash times, more explosive reels. One by one, names were called, and Amon-Ra just sat there waiting. Round 1 concluded. Then round 2. And every pick just hammered the message home even harder. Dependable, but not elite. By the time day 3 kicked off, the consensus was set. Teams viewed him as organizational depth, a slot receiver, a role player. Detroit had a different view. With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride. Baby. Yeah. When the Lions finally made the call in the 4th round, it wasn't because they thought they had found a bargain. It was because they were certain they had found a grinder, someone who was reliable, someone who would execute any assignment given to him, and then some. What no one in that room understood at that moment was this. They hadn't selected a role player. They had selected a man who keeps receipts, because Amon-Ra memorized every single name taken before his. I just don't forget stuff like that. You know, I'll see a guy across the field when we're playing, and it just reinforces that I'm going to make every one of those teams regret it. He didn't forget a single analysis that put a cap on his potential. He didn't forget how easily the league dismissed him all over again. And when he got to Detroit, that entire memory became high-octane fuel. The Lions were in a full-blown rebuild. All right, this is how this team is going to be built. We are going to kick you square in the teeth. Got it? And when you punch us back, we're going to smile right at you. And when you knock us on our ass, we're going to get up. And when we get up, we're going to bite a kneecap off. A new coaching staff, a new quarterback, and a new identity being forged from the ground up. And at first, Amon-Ra was precisely what the reports predicted. He was steady, 2nd and 20. Goff throws. Good connection to St. Brown. He ran crisp routes. He secured the football. He didn't turn it over. But as the season wore on, a clear shift began. On an offense that was desperate for answers, he was the one Jared Goff consistently turned to on crucial 3rd downs. I wanted him out there more because, we were pretty thin at receiver, and I knew, okay, this guy's a rookie. I can maybe, in my own way, shape him and teach him everything I can. When a play would break down near the goal line, his target numbers would inch higher. Soon, they started to multiply. By the middle of the season, opponents were still guarding him like a number 2 option, and he made them pay the price. A delayed run, nice cutback, touchdown, Lions. He systematically dismantled zone defenses, finding the pockets of space before linebackers knew what hit them. He converted short passes into 1st downs, and then came the final stretch of the season that changed his entire trajectory. Over the last 6 games of his debut year, Amon-Ra simply took over. 51 catches, 560 yards, and 5 trips to the end zone. That wasn't a player on a hot streak. That was a statement of dominance. And Amon-Ra St. Brown has been named the NFL's Rookie of the Week. He brought in 8 passes for 109 yards. He concluded the season with 90 catches, which set a new franchise record for a rookie receiver in Lions history. Not because he was flashy, but because he was always, without fail, exactly where he was supposed to be. Every single week, the same disciplined pattern played out. He wasn't about flair. His strength was being exactly where he needed to be every single time. You could set your watch by it week after week. When defenses focused their efforts elsewhere, Amon-Ra made them answer for it underneath. The league simply saw it as another quality play. Detroit saw it as a building block. Year 2 was no longer about showing he deserved to be there. It was about demonstrating just how dominant he could become. By 2022, defenses knew exactly what they were facing in Amon-Ra St. Brown. But knowing didn't make a difference. It's 3rd down and 4, Goff shifts right and lets it fly. In the end zone, Goff has protection. He finds his man. Who else? It's St. Brown. Opponents shaded coverage toward him, daring Detroit to find another way to win. But Amon-Ra was always one step ahead, sharpening his releases to counter them. His tempo within his routes became a science, and his connection with Jared Goff made timing plays feel like foregone conclusions. He's among the absolute best in this league. A true stud. He contributes everywhere in the ground game and in the air. He is the most dependable player I have ever thrown a football to in my entire life. We have a seriously strong chemistry developing. The statistics were a direct result of his command. 106 catches, 1,161 yards, and 6 touchdowns. But the numbers didn't paint the whole picture. He emerged as Detroit's go-to guy in critical moments. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been so effective in his first 2 professional seasons. He is unquestionably a player you can build your fantasy team around as your number 1 wideout. On 3rd and medium, they went to him. In the 2-minute drill, they went to him. In the red zone, they went to him. While other receivers thrived on big, explosive moments, Amon-Ra built his game on absolute certainty. Every repetition was identical. Yet defenses were powerless to stop it. At this point, the league finally grasped the error it had made. Amon-Ra St Brown of the Detroit Lions has been compensated like a top-tier wide receiver. This wasn't just a slot specialist. This was a receiver forged through precision, elite conditioning, and an obsessive commitment to preparation. The Lions no longer had to design plays to get him the ball. Instead, defenses had to find a way to contain him. And just when the NFL believed it had defined his limits, Amon-Ra unlocked a new level of performance, born from pure refinement. The first thing you have to do is write down your objectives. That is a non-negotiable for me every single year. They're tucked away somewhere. That's right, I have to put my goals on paper. Then, before every single practice, I review them. Every single time I step on the field, heading into this season, he was no longer looking for approval. He was on a quest for total mastery. The tempo of his routes actually decelerated, not from a loss of speed, but because he had learned how to dictate defender movements through his pacing. He began to win leverage battles before the play even started, using his eyes to sell fakes and securing the advantage before the quarterback even released the ball. And the results came instantly. In the past 3 weeks, Amon-Ra has tied Calvin Johnson and Herman Moore for the most touchdowns by a Lions receiver through a season's first 4 games, with 6 already. Week in and week out, he established himself as one of the most reliable receivers in the game. Not a boomer bust player, not reliant on scheme, just consistently undeniable. The numbers piled up once more. High volume receptions, top tier efficiency, and an incredibly low drop rate. But the real shift was in how defenses approached him, because Amon-Ra's success isn't built on speed alone. It's built on meticulous preparation. I've watched him every single week. He's so fluid, the way he approaches his craft, how he executes his routes, and why he runs them the way he does. He does it with conditioning that remains unwavering late in the fourth quarter, and with a deep knowledge of coverages that makes difficult throws look routine. Now, Detroit doesn't question if he's getting open. They operate on the assumption that he will be. This season wasn't about proving Amon-Ra St Brown is a great player. It was about proving his greatness is here to stay. St Brown embodies who we are. He defines our identity. He's developing into the player we always believed he could become. He's as dependable as any player I've ever shared a field with. 3rd down, 4th down, it makes no difference. He's going to step up and deliver. A constant, a benchmark, the type of receiver that defensive coordinators game plan against all week and still can't neutralize. And if you trace his journey from the beginning, this ascent was no fluke. Amon-Ra St Brown didn't show up as a ready-made star. He forged himself into one through relentless repetition. Through early mornings that were never recorded, routes that never made the highlight reels, and standards that were never compromised. He transformed doubt into an advantage and preparation into a weapon, turning unwavering consistency into legitimate superstardom. If you don't match my level of intensity, you simply won't find me working with you. Detroit didn't just get a receiver. They got a culture setter, the type of player who elevates the performance of everyone around him simply because he refuses to allow his own effort to waver. And that is the true significance of his rise. It wasn't remarkable for being spectacular, but for being entirely predictable. If you enjoy in-depth NFL profiles about players who fought for every ounce of their success, be sure to subscribe and like. We analyze the careers of those nobody gave a chance to until their success became too powerful to deny.